The webinar will cover audience engagement, content development, community and fundraising advice, and digital fundraising on Facebook. Today's webinar is the last in a series of 4 we've developed the Good Sports Club. And for those people who don't know anything about the sports program, the sports program has been around for years. We have 10,000 clubs that are good sports clubs in the country, which is brilliant. We love having people part of our program, and we support clubs to be the best that they can be. We support them around managing alcohol, illegal drugs. We support junior environments. And in a couple of states, we even provide support around mental health and healthy eating. The webinars have been offered to provide a comprehensive toolkit for good sports clubs to help with your fundraising activities in the future. The webinars have been recorded, and toolkits with frequently asked questions will be housed on the Good Sports website, and these will be available in a few weeks' time. Our presenters are all fundraising specialists who have had many years of experience to draw on. And today we'll cover community fundraising and top tips for using digital tools for fundraising. Pretty fortunate presenters today, so you may have heard me before we started. So we have Karen Armstrong. Karen's a marketing expert with over 15 years of experience across fast-moving consumer goods and non-for-profit marketing. She is Director of More Impact, part of the More Strategic Group, and was previously Director Marketing and Fundraising at Cancer Council Australia. Commercially, she's worked in the UK and Australia with Kraft Foods, which is recognised internationally for the best integrated sales and marketing campaign. She's passionate about blending the science of the mind, emotions and society to change the world for good. Sounds awesome, Karen. Our second presenter today is Plummer. Marianne was always going to end up fundraising. A little story here. She spent much of her childhood selling Christmas cakes off the back of a truck, riding shotgun on her mother's Meals on Wheels visits, counting collection money after church, and manning cake stalls. She trained for fundraising in TV journalism and mainstream advertising. She comes most recently from 8 years as the creative director of Burrito Fundraising. If you could please post your questions using the chat button, and we'll do our best to get to some of these today. All questions will be included in the FAQ document I mentioned earlier. But thank you both to Karen and Marianne for presenting. Really looking forward to hearing what you've got to say. Just a reminder that these sessions are recorded as well. Thanks both for coming along, and over to you, Karen.
Fabulous. Well, thank you, Mark, and thanks for a lovely introduction. So hopefully my sound is coming through okay, but please just let me know if there's any challenges with sound. So it is great to be back with you all for the 4th of the webinars that we've been running through. You've also had the chance to meet Joe and Luke since I last got up with you all, and today we've got Marianne joining us. So I'm really looking forward to what Marianne will be taking you through, and I think lots of it. You know, we've been really trying to move from, at the start, paint the overall picture of everything that you can potentially do, and then really move into some practical examples of how we can make this happen for your club. So hopefully that will be achieved today. So we're going to go through a little bit around community fundraising overall, the types of events that you can do, what third party looks like, and we're going to give you some overview of kind of tools that you can use, platforms that you can use, processes that you need to be thinking about as well. So it's a little bit of everything today. And I'm going to take you through, first of all, just a quick reminder of saying, remember when we looked at the whole Giving Australia piece of how much is being donated by Australians every year? We actually see that raffles and events is actually contributing about 1.3 billion into giving, which contributes around about 10% of giving. So again, we often think about our raffles or our barbecues or those types of things as being really small fundraisers. And I think when you look at the impact that it has overall, it's pretty tremendous. So that's the type of numbers that we're talking about. But I did just want to share this one slide with you, which is an internal piece of benchmarking we do across the charity sector to say, well, for every dollar that you spend on fundraising, how much more money can you actually raise? Because I think one of the challenges is always, well, how do we actually make fundraising happen if we've got no money to spend and we have to do it on a shoestring? And this example just shows you that for community fundraising, why today is so important is that on average, for every dollar that is an input, you're raising more than $7 in return. So you can really see that a kind of a small investment up front can potentially really change the way that you're raising funds. And I will talk about some of the other types of events that you can do fundraising for. So you might have ticket events where you might have had everyone coming along to a meal and things like that. I know we've got less of that happening at the moment. They would on average triple the money that you're spending. So that's roughly what you're looking at there. What I would say is always with these things, you should be thinking about, well, what's the net amount of funds that we'll have raised at the end? So quite often we'll think, oh, well, we'll have a big event and you can raise quite a lot. You can have people contributing quite a lot to the actual event. But if the cost of having, food and drinks and entertainment and everything like that gets offset against that, then sometimes your fundraising can get very, very small. So really, when you're thinking about community fundraising, think about which ones you're selecting based on the ones most likely to generate the most income back to your club, really. And so all of them have a slightly different return. The other one I'll just flag here is peer-to-peer. I'm going to talk a little bit about peer-to-peer fundraising today. And again, you tend to kind of triple the amount of money that you invest there based on what you're spending. I know, again, you're going to be spending very, very small amounts, but you can still look at that kind of multiplier effect. And then moving into the type of mix, I thought this was useful just to show you where most charities are raising their money. So around about when you come into this kind of events mix of how charities are fundraising, about 30% is coming through community fundraising. So, and we're actually seeing community fundraising across the board is growing. We're really seeing that people want to raise funds and raise funds in their own way. So we'll talk a lot about the way that you can actually really engage and enable people to raise funds on your behalf. And then the other one tends to be these mass participation events. So they will be large events like a Movember or a Daffodil Day or a Relay for Life. But what I'm going to talk to you about is more how you can actually leverage mass participation events from a third-party perspective. So you don't need to necessarily be creator of these big types of events, but you can still fundraise off the back of them. So we'll talk about that as well. So they're the two kind of key areas that we're seeing revenue being driven in community fundraising. And then community fundraising is one of the more complex really parts of the ways that charities raise money, and that's because there's quite a few different ways you can think about it. And so when we think about community fundraising, we think about it on two spectrums. So one is who's going to do the work, and I know that all of you are super busy people, and so this is about saying, well, there's a responsibility that could be all of your committee that are all responsible for setting up and getting all the fundraising happening. Or there's all the way down the other end of the spectrum of that is to say that actually we're trying to get as many other people as possible to really be the drivers of fundraising. So we always look at these two sides of the spectrum. And I'll talk to you more about the pros and cons of thinking about it in that way. Then the second part is really the connection to the cause. So across this spectrum, we're thinking about, well, how close to the club are they? Or how far removed, and do we need to bring people in through a different event? And so the easiest way to give that as an example of the novelty and third party down this left side of the table is that if you're trying to get people to engage, but they're not directly connected to the club and they're not immediately, engaged to say, oh, I definitely want to give to this club, you'll see things like, I know that on our local oval here, is that we'll see people put up big blow-up soccer fun days and things like that. So all the kids can come and have a kick, or they can go and try throwing basketballs through hoops and things like that. So you'll be looking for things that can create some sense of novelty. So in here we've got exactly that example of, Movember or World's Greatest Shave. So you're trying to get people engaged with something they'd like to do for fun. Third-party events are slightly different. So they're activities that you don't need to go and put on, but it's things like City to Surf, for example, and actually people can go and engage in that because they wanted to do the City to Surf anyway, but they'd actually also love to raise funds, and there's a lot of fundraising that happens around those types of events. So really at this point in time, we're looking for events that are of interest to individuals, and that's actually why they want to get involved. Down the other end, you're going for ones that are going to be much more closely aligned to your club and what that kind of drives. And again, whether these are appropriate or not will be one of those decisions that you can make for your club. But as an example, because I had been from Cancer Council, we used to look at those people who have gone through a life experience around cancer. We would have a special event that was called Relay for Life. And it was very much about making sure that we honoured people who had cancer or were living with cancer. And so you go right down that end. So you might, for example, if you're doing something that was really empathy-based, you might have a fundraising day that was saying, here's our sports team ready to go. These are the people who are going to be representing us for the year, and we need to raise funds for their travel and their accommodation, etc., and all those types of things. So you might look at a way of really making it very much about why they're there and what they're actually going to see as the outcomes. You drive it right down that empathy based. The other types of events obviously then fall within that kind of matrix of opportunities. So you do things like growth events, and I think growth is a really good one because people at the moment particularly are really looking for ways to stay fit, and they're probably looking for virtual ways, and we know that this kind of virtual fundraising is going to be growing for us. So they're going to be looking for, is there a nice challenge that we can do? So, there's one on there which is September, so do 10,000 steps for the month of September. Or there's Jump Rope for Heart. There's Quit Drinking. So we just had Dry July, and I think they had their biggest year yet. So I think they're up like $9 million. But it just demonstrates they're actually having real growth in the growth area because people are really looking for these things that they can actually do, especially while we're in this kind of COVID lockdown. What are the types of activities I can do that is great for me and also great for the club at the same time? So a way to actually create an opportunity to fundraise. Then there's more of your tougher challenges. So they're going to be like your Oxfam Trail Walker, which is you're walking 100 kilometres or you're walking 50 kilometres for a coast trek, etc. So they're much more high level challenges, and so you're pushing people, and you'll see things like triathlons and long walks, long rides, any of those types of things. So things that are going to really push you. People will often do these types of things as community fundraisers. They'll say, I want to cycle from Sydney to Melbourne. And again, some of these things are not possible at the moment, so they'll need to find something within their own states. But they'll be looking for some type of really big challenge that they can actually fundraise for, but again, achieve something that's on their own bucket list. It's a really aspirational goal. Then you've got these two that really fall into the event space. So the hosted event, I think could really apply to the way that you fundraise, because this is about people organising get-togethers where they can share a cup of tea and make a donation on the day. But we're seeing a real movement to these virtually as well. So just like we're having Zoom now, people getting together and having the opportunity to get together, which they're not having at the moment, creating the reason to actually see them come together and start to have a chat about what we can do or what's happening or how's everybody feeling, etc. But actually still, again, making contributions during that moment. So it gives a reason for people to connect. And then later down the track, I'm sure, and some of these will, in small levels will be happening at the moment, but is your kind of your gala or your ticketed type events. So whether you do decide to put on, again, I know ours has an annual club dinner every year, so you can be thinking about, well, how do you really drive that from a fundraising perspective beyond just the social get-together, and really kind of move forward there. So they're the types of events. So sometimes when you think about, well, how can I fundraise? This is a great little model just to go back to and go, okay, well, what might work for my audience? And I know we've talked a lot about understanding your audience and what's going to connect them. We're really got to be thinking about where do they sit with their connection to the club, and what type of person is going to be helping us drive that. And look, I've already touched on this so far, just even in explaining a couple of those examples. But obviously community fundraising is changing. So a lot of these are showing you what we can do, what we have done historically, but there is this whole evolution that is happening because of COVID, which means we're starting to move everything virtual and online. But it does mean that there's a whole range of tools and techniques that you will see eventuating. And I think that actually now is a great opportunity, and if you go back to the first webinar we ran, is that once we're through this COVID phase, there's going to be a real desire for people to reconnect. And so thinking about how you can do that means that community fundraising is going to take on a whole new meaning because of the importance of really creating that opportunity to get together. But we're definitely going to see this move to more of those being virtual. And so why community is an area that I absolutely love is because these people who take on community fundraising are deeply passionate, and what you actually see is the most creative, brilliant ideas. I was just looking at one for Cancer Council yesterday for Daffodil Day, actually, because they're trying to work out, well, how do we raise funds virtually? And I saw Will, who's been doing head shaves and has been doing challenges with make 100 cookies or eat 100 jelly beans or whatever it happens to be. All these different ways of just coming up with creativity, and they're constantly thinking about, well, how do I create a reason to go and talk to my friends and family and help raise money for something that's really, really important for me. So they're fun. They sometimes will use a kind of a competitive edge. They'll use humour. They're creating connections. So they're super fun, these types of fundraising opportunities. And when we're thinking about it, we're really thinking about, well, who's the audience and how can we really help to get them active as community fundraisers. And again, you'll remember this slide we went through was to say, well, we go from that kind of those people who are really close to you all the way out to the general public. Now, the role that community fundraising can really do for you, and event fundraising with peer-to-peer, is that it actually takes you from your really close network of families who will be donating. And I know that we're always kind of cognizant that we don't want to draw on them too much to be constantly propping up the clubs, but it gives a chance for those people to reach into their communities, to just broaden out to those people who are likely to want to give to the clubs and why they actually see it important. So we're looking for those opportunities to create those networks. And so what this looks like is that actually once you move out into that sphere of saying we're trying to build on those relationships, we're moving into this peer-to-peer asking. So when I'm talking about peer-to-peer, really what we're talking about here is it's somebody like me who's going to fundraise, and I'm going to go and ask all the people who are at our local school to potentially participate. I'm going to ask the grandparents to contribute. So we're looking for that type of relationship. So part of the reason people give through peer-to-peer is because of the person that asks them and the person that they know. So actually they often give it as a really a gesture towards that person rather than the cause. So that's what I mean. We're just a little bit further distance from being right involved as part of the club. The second thing is that it will depend on what type of activity. So people will give. So when you're thinking about the types of challenges or activities or what people are doing, if you take even those just couple of examples I just talked about, the bake 100 cookies or going and doing a long bicycle ride around one of the states, people will give a different amount of money based on their perceived challenge or novelty or how that activity is presented to them. So they'll go, actually shaving all your head off, or making a different, shaving all your head off, shaving all your hair off, let's go with that, you know, doing a bike ride. One of those I really, really want to see. So someone will give you a lot more for that. And then the other ones are smaller ones, and they'll give you smaller amounts of donations. So again, it's that kind of perceived challenge that is in front of them. And then finally, it's really about how well is the story presented to them. And again, Marianne's going to talk about this, but how do you make sure there is this story that is rich and really kind of drives urgency and relevance to them, so they can go, actually, I really believe in that, and that's something that I really connect with, so I want to give to that cause. And so when you're thinking about peer-to-peer, it's a slightly different relationship than when we're thinking about a club directly asking for a donation. So it's really building on that personal component piece. This is a quick slide just when thinking about how do we really make our fundraising effective. I know that sometimes you feel a little bit disheartened because you feel like, well, we created something and we thought it was going to be brilliant and it didn't really take off. And so then it means you kind of feel a bit disheartened, you don't want to do it again next year. But what you've really got to focus on is how you actually build this up over time so that we get better and better and better each year, really. And we know that this happens. It takes time to build campaigns and to build engagement. And so these are the basic numbers that you're looking for. What you're looking for is constant improvements in them so that you can really be building these community fundraising activities. So each year you'll be looking at how many people have registered, and I'll talk more about registering, what that process looks like, but how many people have registered to say that they would love to be a community fundraiser for you. How many people then take part? So we also know that those people who say, yeah, I'll do it, also get a little bit nervous and may or may not then go ahead and actually do the activity and raise money. Then there's the number of people who raise money, obviously, is the number of people that they go and ask. So that the next thing that I'll be thinking about with community fundraising is making sure that you're really enabling people to be confident about fundraising. We think that fundraising or asking someone to make a donation is easy. It's not. So we've got to constantly be making sure that we're kind of nurturing people to make it as easy as possible. It'll be the number of people that actually give to that person, the average gift that they give. So again, you're thinking about the challenge size at this point. And then the people who just keep coming back year on year. So one of the things we do find is that one person might do a really big fundraiser one year and they might raise $20,000. We don't see those people coming back as much because there's such a high energy load that goes into it. And then there's the other people who might say, every year I'm going to run City to Surf and I'm going to make sure there's a donation coming back to the club. That might be an easier one to retain. So they'll come back on year. So you'll be looking for how can you keep those people retained, because sometimes that's just as important as the big fundraiser that might happen as a one-off. And so who is driving community fundraising? So there's two ways you can think about this, as I mentioned at the start. One is that it can be mobilised by your committee within your club. So you can get there and you say, we are going to create this event. We are going to get as many people as possible doing it. You can say, okay, club, we're all going to have the running challenge. We want everybody running 5 kilometres this every day for the next month, for example. So you can come up with a challenge and it's very much driven by you. Now, what this means is that then you can be really clear about the activity, the messaging, the timing. You can be really clear about promoting it, and you can keep using it to build your overall fundraising engagement with people in the community. So there's some really nice things that come with that. The second one that I'm going to talk more about is about saying, well, how do you give freedom and how do you create those connections outside, all of you hardworking people that are in the club? How do you get other people to actually take on fundraising on your behalf? And in this case, those passionate people will tend to do most of the work themselves. And I'm thinking about even examples like, if you've got a parent who's really engaged in their child's sport, they may be a really great audience for someone who is willing to take on fundraising on behalf of a group of children because they're actually really, really deeply passionate about it. Now, what that does mean is you can have less control over the activity. They're going to be really driving it from a message that they believe is going to work. And sometimes they'll really, do crazy things that they'll come up with. So it definitely means that you get more creativity, you'll get bigger ideas coming out of it and everything like that, and you'll have less control. So you'll need to be thinking about, which of those two components or ways of driving community fundraising you're most comfortable with, and then how you're actually going to make that happen. And so if you choose to say, well, let's do a club managed community fundraising, then you can go and create something that might be an annual activity that you do. It might be the event that you have every year, etc. So you'll be thinking about what those things look like. You'll be making sure that you promote it into local community activities. And again, I think most of this I'm going to leave for Marianne to cover, but particularly you'll be looking for how do you have your VIPs and your community leaders really active and really engaged when it's being driven from you. So very, very important to make sure you've got some really strong leaders and influencers and making sure that this works for you. In the type 2 version, that we're really creating a tribe of people who are willing to be your community fundraisers. In this one, you don't need to be as defined or specific about what you're doing. So this is more about going out there and saying, did you know you can fundraise for the club, and give them ideas to really encourage them, give them some guidelines around what they can do. So definitely giving them kind of 5 key things. So, maybe put on a barbecue or do this or do that, whatever it happens to be. Those are really, really helpful, and make sure that you celebrate what that success looks like at the end. So that's really how those 2 pieces come together. And then the third party community fundraiser is just to make sure that you let people know that if they are doing Run Melbourne or Tough Mudder or City to Surf, whatever it happens to be, that they can also raise funds on behalf of the club. So this one works really, really well. You get a great return on investment for here, because you need to do really little amount. And actually, if you've got club t-shirts and everything like that, they can be running branded. It gives you great brand presence, and there's very, very little that you have to do. So mostly this is fantastic for a really low cost base for fundraising. So I'm going to skip through a couple of these because I'm just conscious of time. I just realised how quickly we're getting through today. So the only other thing that I really wanted to mention on the virtual events is that some of the key things that you need to do if you're going to start using some online platforms, and I'm going to touch on online platforms later, is that some of the things that are really helpful to drive up fundraising is to get people competitive. And I suspect this could work really, really well within clubs. People are by nature competitive. They're looking for achieving goals, but targets, both physical targets and financial targets, means that you will really see people raise more, and giving some kind of gamification around that. So you get little celebratory, emblems and things like that happen when you reach, your first $500 raised, etc. So you really try and make sure there's little incentives to keep them going. And then the other really key point is that even if we're doing virtual events, we're doing things online, there is nothing that you can do to replace a personal ask. People are responding, go back to that peer-to-peer diagram, because of the person that has asked them. And so the personal ask is really important. So even though we'll set you up online, making sure that people are making phone calls, people are actually, if they're still able to do face-to-face catch-ups, they're asking face-to-face, they are sending direct SMS messages. That is really, really important, as well as then we'll go on to what we're talking about with Facebook fundraising now. So do not forget the personal ask whenever we're doing any of these activities. So with that, I'm going to now hand across to Marianne, because I know she's got a lot to talk you through on really crafting that message.
Thanks, Karen. Let's assume that you have thought about a great fundraising event or idea for your club. You've thought about your probable images, and you've gone, okay, there's going to be people who are close to us, people who are a little bit further out, and the general community. Your next challenge is to frame the ask. It's to be able to communicate really clearly and well what you want people to do. Now, this is not rocket science. However, I have seen a lot of people muck it up. But this little guide here is a very, very useful way to do this for yourself. And I recommend doing this if you do choose to run something through a club organising committee. I do recommend working this out collaboratively very, very early in the piece, and then writing it down and recording it somewhere, because what it will give you is a base for communication right throughout your event. So the human is a basic unit, sadly. We do need to be told what to do very, very clearly. So break down your fundraising message into what to do, by when. Now, it's very, very important that we have a deadline. The human is a basic unit, and the human does get distracted. So if we are told when we need to do something, we are much more likely to do it at all. We need to tell people what the event or the idea is trying to achieve. And I'll have a bit of a look at that in a minute. The target to aim for is a very interesting one. All direct response marketing, all the evidence and the studies over decades, have indicated that it's really powerful to give people something to rally around. And when you're talking about fundraising, the target to aim for is often a financial target, a really specific amount. There are a whole lot of other benefits to setting a tangible amount too. You want to set a tangible amount, ideally, that is realistic and achievable. You want to set a tangible amount and a target because you can then feedback to people about measures when they're on the way. So you might be able to say to people, we're aiming for 200,000, woohoo, we just hit 100. Or, oh my gosh, we've hit 180 and we just need 20 more. But setting up a really specific tangible amount is great because it lets you G people up and gives people something to aim for. Why is super important. And Karen touched on a little bit earlier. It's not usually just about saying we're a club and we want to raise money to build a thing by a certain point. You do really need to tell your prospective supporters why that is important. Now, the why will depend very significantly on how close they are to the cause. If, for example, you are running an event, the people who are the service users of your club, say you're a footy club, it's going to be the players and or parents or the younger players who are most close to you, right? So the why for those people should be around how this fundraising event and the money raised will make their experience better, will give them more facilities, will help the club perform at a higher rate, and that type of thing. The why for someone a little bit further out, say we're talking about parents, might be a little bit different. I mean, maybe the parents don't really care if their kid's club, reaches the top of the ladder. However, the why for them might be because they want their children to be engaged in a healthy community-based activity. They want their children to learn team dynamics. They want their children to know what it's like to lose and to be able to handle that, for instance. So the why might be a little bit more about the development of their kids. The why for the broader community might be back in that place of community pride. Why do we want these kids' teams to do really well? Because, Bathurst is an awesome place to grow up and, we just love it. We feel a sense of community pride when our teams go out there and do well. It might be something slightly different. You might have had an issue in your community with, for instance, high levels of drug and alcohol use. So the why there might be because it's really important for people in our community to have activities that are healthy for body and mind and, not about, booze and drugs. And then the how. That's a really interesting one. If I'm going to ask you to do something, I need to tell you how. And if, Karen, we go to the next slide, I'll just take you through some of this stuff. So in fundraising, no matter what you're fundraising for, there is always an overarching narrative. Just as in, a major motion picture film like Star Wars, there's always a sort of a big idea across the top. We've got to save the planet, buy the blah, beat the Death Star, and get to know your father. So there's always sort of an overarching narrative going on. So what to do for you, for your clubs might be donate. It might be sign up to do a particular activity. It might be sponsor someone. It might be sponsor the event. The date, as I mentioned, the by when is super important. To achieve what? Maybe you want a new gym or new facilities for your club or a new oval. The target to aim for might be $192,000, for instance, and I didn't round that off. If it's $192,000 that you want, write $192,000. It actually makes it more realistic. People go, that's a fair income amount. That's not some sort of contrived amount. And again, there are multiple reasons why. To give our kids a healthy activity, to support local sports people, for instance, you might have a local star, to support rehab, as in maybe you're building a gym for your club and you want other members of the community to be able to use that to do their rehab. And how would be to sign up at this landing page for a third-party website, go to your website, but always tell them how. Now, you might be thinking, you know what, to achieve things, not that sort of interesting for us. We just want money so that the club can keep going and do a whole lot of, admin-y sort of stuff. It's nothing too exciting. That's fine. You don't actually need to say what you're going to achieve in that instance. But what I would do if you're fundraising for just general funds is to set a target. And what I would do is to very, very clearly articulate a why. And what you'll find when you sit down and work the stuff out and write it up is that you have already an overarching narrative. So it might be donate to a particular event by Christmas, so we can build a new gym for the club. We need to raise $192,000. Benefits of this will be, kids, community, blah. And here's how I want you to do it. Always tell people how you want them to do it and exactly what you want them to do. Now, Karen, if we go to the next page, let's have a look at how your big picture narrative might be adjustable or advisedly adjusted for different audiences. So let's say our overarching fundraising message is donate online here. There might be a link to the website to help build a new club gym. We need 92 grand by Christmas, to give our town blah, blah, blah benefit. All right, so that's you'll be wanting to write that on every single thing that you do. If you're sending out emails or SMSs or texts, you might be telling your people in the club who are very well connected that this is the message to put out, right? And that message has got to be consistent no matter who's saying it or what channels you're saying it in. Now you start to get a bit more granular with your thinking. So we've got this basic message. I'm looking at potential sponsors and I'm going, oh, okay, I need to tweak that message a little bit here. So things I might need to tweak are what I want you to do. Don't particularly want you to donate in a classic way. I might want you to sponsor. If you are talking to club members, I'm going to change the language a little bit and I'm going to use the word your club. And when I'm talking to them about the benefits, I'm going to say you, your children, your family, because that makes it more immediately relevant to them. If I'm talking to parents, I'm going to change the why. Think about the example I gave before. I'm a parent. I'm trying to fill my kid's life up because I don't want her down at the park at the end of the street hanging out with too much time on her hands. So I'm super happy to support something in my local community which gives that child more options that are healthy and skills building. So when I'm talking about that why to parents, I'm going to be thinking about what's going to matter to them, what's going to motivate them to give, what the self-interest is in for them. I was thinking about Karen's lovely sort of, sometimes stuff is just fun to do or it's a challenge. So, there might be lots of lovely, healthy sports nutters in your community who are going to do stuff because it is your to Alistair. Always speak to an individual person. So Alistair queried, he's saying, if it's a club member, should I change language to your club or our club? Yes, it is our club, but when you are speaking to an individual, you make it personal and singular. So if I'm talking directly to someone saying, I want you to donate this money because it's going to improve your club, I would say your club. I was talking about the novelty or the challenge in particular events. Sometimes, people aren't particularly going to be motivated by the fact that it's going to help someone they know or improve the prospects of a local team. It will just be about their opportunity to have a bit of fun with their mates, challenge themselves to cycle 10 Ks a day. And so with the why, you can say that stuff. You can say, challenge your mates. And that is a really nice one to bring. Karen used the term gamification. Sporty people love that sort of competitive thing. We love the idea of getting fit. I mean, your why could be, you know, if we build the gym at the club, you've got a better chance of getting a date with, you know, Kate Moss or a supermodel. I'm having some fun here. Your why could be, even though you're 72 years old, you might be able to resume your career as a supermodel. Your why could be, you'll be back playing first grade footy with Parramatta next season if we build this gym. And I'm having some fun there, but you can see what I'm doing. I'm changing my message just a little bit to accommodate or to cater to the motivations of the different audiences that I'm talking to. So there's another way to adjust the overarching message just slightly. It's still the same there in that light blue panel at the top. This is the same message. But now I'm thinking about how it might change a wee bit at different times. Just before you launch your event, or a month before you launch your event, I reckon you should tease about it. You could say, you know, get your lycra out, everyone. You know, pump up the tires. There's something really interesting coming your way soon. Tease. It's a good way. It's a good thing to tease people too. Do an email or some sort of contact with people early, even before you launch stuff. At launch, you might say, woohoo, we've launched our event. Today is the first day of the, you know, Great Bathurst Bake Off. Come on, if you haven't signed up already, if you're not getting involved, if you haven't got enough groceries, get it all sorted and create some drama and excitement about that. You're still going to ask people to do X by Y to achieve Z, but there's some other things that you can think about. A reminder, hey, I see you've signed up for the event. You've got yourself any sponsors yet. Need any help from us? Come on, it's super important. It's so important to raise money for our club. You might say to people, rip row, awesome work, guys. We're halfway there to the target. Come on, power up now. Do a little bit more. Get another sponsor. Chuck some more money in. And then you might do that 7 days before your deadline or $10,000 before your financial target, etc., etc. You can build other little milestones into something. If you've got a thing that's going for a while and it's a bit sluggish, you can chuck little bits of energy into it. So you might say, oh, the club chairman has said that he'll match the money raised today. Or your club superstar athlete says that she will cycle the combined kilometres of everyone who gets on their bike today. So you can chuck little challenges into this that are relevant, that are fun, and that just boost things with a bit of energy. All right, so that's what you do sort of to adjust your messages. People frequently go, okay, what communications challenges should I use with this stuff? How am I going to get these messages out? I recommend email. It's efficient. It allows you to write one thing and send it to a lot of people. It is relatively inexpensive, and you can adjust it really slightly to those different audiences that we showed you a moment ago. So I'm a copywriter by trade. I can write one base document, and then there might be just 2 paths in my base email. And I go, oh, you know what? I could really just dial up that bit for that particular audience. So I'll write base email with one variation for that audience. There might be something further down where I can go, you know what? I think I need to add a special thing in here for another audience. So again, I take my one base email, but I might write a second little slight variation. And it's quite an efficient way to do this. Things to consider here. You must have an email list, and I absolutely recommend that you be gathering, storing email lists. And you need permission to send people those emails. You can't just buy an email list or you know, email someone because you happen to know their list for another reason and expect that that's okay. It's not. There's some fairly serious penalties and privacy issues around that stuff. So and it makes sense. You know, we don't want to be contacted by people who we haven't really genuinely given our details to. So don't do that and you'll be fine. So email is awesome, and you can email people over the course of the event, you know, 3, 5, 7, 10 times, as long as you say something different each time, as long as it's relevant and as long as it's, you know, not really tortuously sort of lengthy. So email is excellent. And the second thing that I'd recommend doing is Facebook. Look, amazing. Yes, you can email your existing supporters. or people who you already have on a database, Christy, who's just pinged me a little message. Facebook is very, very good too. Massive reach. It gives you all sorts of little funky formats that you can play with. You know what? Facebook is built as a people think, oh, it's all about social interaction. It's not. It's a massive marketing, money-making engine, Facebook. And, you know, don't think that Facebook is necessarily for young people. Actually, if you look at the way Facebook usage is changing, the greatest increase in growth is older people. And I'm talking a lot older, like people born sort of, you know, 1940 onwards are getting into Facebook. The sweet spot for Facebook is women aged, I think it's 28 to 45, interestingly enough. That's probably moved older a bit since I last looked. If you do stuff on Facebook, remember that you can see Facebook, the feed that shows on your phone is different to the feed that shows on my laptop. Always make your stuff so it's going to look good and be readable on phone. And there's some little stats about Facebook you can use there. Now, two places that you can, or there's two ways you can promote things on Facebook. One, you can use an existing Facebook page. So perhaps your club has got the, you know, Bathurst Bowls Facebook page. You can put stuff on that. That is going to reach the people who are already on that page. You can also do paid Facebook marketing. It's slightly more tricky, but it is not as difficult as you might imagine, so don't worry. You do pay for the use of that. So what you would do there is you would go, okay, I'm going to market to, and what it allows you to do is target. So I'm going to go to people inside Bathurst, anyone in Bathurst who plays sport, anyone in Bathurst between a particular age, and Facebook actually lets you sort of do this targeting. And then you are going to pay, and it's like an auction system actually. You are going to pay for the number of people who actually click on your stuff. But what it does allow you to do is to target people very, very nicely. And you pay for the people you target. So you're not sort of going into a mass audience, which is good. Now, I am going to move along because I am conscious of time. Communications channels that you should use are old style. Karen said, get people who are well connected to talk. Get local sports people to sprout your event. Put up a poster in the club, and if you can't put things in clubs at the moment, see if local shop fronts and businesses will put things up for you. You know, posters, get people to talk to their mates. If there's a local paper or a local radio, you know, a journalist, you know, do that stuff. Go and talk to someone and say, hey, will you give us a plug? Will you talk about our thing? Maybe you'll cover our thing because it's cool and interesting, and it's also, you know, about local community. Now, content tips, brainstorm, sit together in a room when you're thinking about why, and then work up content that's about the why. If your why and your fundraising ask is about supporting young athletes, you know, what's a great piece of content? A picture of a young athlete and a little bit of the story about that young athlete and what she or he has achieved and is aiming for, with your ask, your overarching proposition underneath that. That's a great bit of content. Imagery is very, very important. Don't go and book and buy for professional photographers unless you are loaded. Take photos on your you know, this thing. You can also use a thing called royalty-free imagery. Just Google it. And design is interesting. There's a thing called Canva, easy online design tool. Young Aussie entrepreneur sorted this thing and it's gone nuts. It really makes it easy. It's kind of idiot-proof design. It's not as good as a proper professional paid designer, but it's a good, you know, it's a good utility hack for people who haven't got proper professional designer money. Video is great too. All right, now, this is a couple of blokes from New Zealand who raised more than $2 million without any fundraising experience, without a database, without ever doing a seminar like this. They bought a beach. New Zealand could not afford to look after a beach in the Abel Tasman Park area. They put it out for tender. And all these companies and multinationals from all over the world were going to buy this beautiful beach. And these guys went, that is wrong. I want Kiwis to buy the beach. And so they ran a campaign called Buy a Beach. We go to the next one, Karen. What they did, no strategy, no experience, they appealed to people's hearts. They set it straight up, they kept at it. They did great stuff like this. They made literally on bits of cardboard, funny little pieces like this and put them on their sort of website. Amount that gets done, number of people who leave it up to someone else, little graph. They're having a bit of fun with this. If we go to the next slide, and this was done all that, and then, you know, they got other people to take photos of themselves with that bit of, you know, their little bit of cardboard. It's so simple, it's so unprofessional, it's so unmarketing, but it's so authentic. If we go to the next one, I don't think I can show you this, but these guys were super clever. They did a video update from one of the guys' sheds every couple of days, and they had little bits of cardboard paper, and they said, here's how much we've raised, and here's a shout out to blah, blah. They were funny, really, really funny, dry fellas. And, you know, it worked, and it worked. They bought the Jolly Beach, they won the tender, they raised over $2 million in something like a month from everyday people. So if these guys can do it, so can you.
So I just realised why you don't get two people with 20 years of experience to try and do a 50-minute webinar. So we've covered a lot just now. So thank you for everyone joining us. What you will have in the toolkit is some more information about some of those practical pieces. Marianne's already mentioned it, things like Canva. There's a whole range of online tools now. I've just put some logos up there for you. But lots of these are free now. People are getting access to free online tools that you can do fundraising. Some of these also can do your regular giving, gifts as well, or your individual donations, etc. And we're going to give you a little bit around some of the processes that you need to be thinking about. You do need to give people authorities to fundraise. You need to make sure that people are really clear about what they're able to do. So this is not legal advice, but it is practical advice for how to get your community fundraising up and running. So with that, I'm going to hand back across to Mary and just see if there's any questions that you would like to cover at this point in time.
Thank you very much, Marianne and Karen. That was a great presentation. There is a question here about emails. You know, a lot of the people that are being emailed are really busy people. So how do you get them to cut through and get, you know, that you've got work emails, personal emails, all kinds of stuff. How do you get cut through to get people to actually read them?
Marianne, do you want to take that one? Would you want me to? Well, I'll quickly cover it. So one of the keys is that actually we've started using different types of channels. And again, I'll go back to that kind of the personal ask. It's really good if you do see them to let them know the email's coming. You're right. There's so many emails that go through and you miss them. We are seeing that email open rates are getting smaller and smaller. So basically what you have to do is you have to be thinking about all the channels that you can communicate with people to, and you have to use all of them. Some people are really good with opening emails, but other ones you might need to send them an SMS. Other people you need to do face-to-face. So actually what I'm finding more and more is you have to constantly use a mix of those things and make sure it's on your social media. Sometimes what you will feel is though you're communicating to people over the top, and to be honest, most of the time no one else will have any sense of that. You can almost never go over the top because they miss a post that happens to be in the Facebook, or they miss the email that came through. So you can pretty much, you know, message as many channels and as frequently as you would like, and you won't wear people out. But it's definitely, you need to use that multi-channel type approach and let people know that the email's coming out wherever you possibly can.
I'd also like to add that they, if people know someone and that email is coming from, they will open it. So don't try to make your emails too formal or tricky or anything. You know, subject line, you know, urgent message from your club, for instance, is going to get more cut through than you know, I don't know, when Bingley sends you the latest sale. Make it clear who you are and what you're talking about in the subject line. At least be straight up front, and that gives people, you know, a better chance. And as I said, if they already know you and respect you or like you, they're more likely to open that than just marketing.
Okay. Thank you both. I think we covered most of the questions that as they popped up. Marianne, you covered most of them. There was just one other thing. Someone asked a question about how to keep the records and is there a cheap database or a way to keep it? Is an Excel spreadsheet the right thing to do? Like, how would you keep your lists?
Yeah, that's a really good one, and I think we'll cover that in the toolkit for you. But there's a couple of options that you can consider. So obviously the simplest one is to have a Excel spreadsheet, but if you want to, if you're going to go fundraising, then I would use one of these, and actually a lot of they're pretty self-sufficient. They will keep everybody in there for you, and you can quite often send emails from there and everything, so that you don't have to have multiple sources. Otherwise, you can do things like HubSpot and those types of free CRMs if people aren't using those. But it is a good idea, if you can, to move to one of these types of platforms instead, because it's going to make your life a lot easier rather than kind of constantly scrummaging around looking for spreadsheets or lists or your last contact list that you sent something to. So these are a great place to start.
Thank you. Okay, because we're running out of time, I think we might leave it there. I'm just going to launch the poll that we usually ask you to complete. So if you've got a few minutes to answer a few questions for us, we'd really appreciate that. This is the last in the series of webinars. So we're now having a bit of a think about what we might do next. The toolkits and the recordings will be made available in the next few weeks. The first lot are due to come out next week. So we'll be sending an email to all of the clubs to let you know that they are available. So if you just wouldn't mind filling out the poll for us now. And thank you very much for attending today. And we hope that you really enjoyed the session. Thank you.